anybody that does good work in my hood, you know I love you. So thank you for all that you've done. You too, Edie. But thank you so much for having me here, and especially on this occasion, to honor the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. And you know, it's so interesting that I'm the guest of the Social Entrepreneurship Center, because I've been called that for a really long time, and to tell you the truth, I didn't really know what it meant. I was just like, sure, call me whatever you want, I'll take it. And but the bottom line is, so much of my work has been entrepreneurial in nature. It really has been, you know, and it was really just about how do you, it's really everything that I do, it's project-based development, and I sort of embrace everything as a venture. I do. It's you ID a problem and think about what is a desirable way to fill the need of that problem that it creates. Beta test it with some kind of angel investment, somebody who believes in you in some way, shape, or form, whether it's financially or in some other way. And then you observe what that project looks like once you get it in the ground, and then you refine it somewhere along the way. And then that's when you come in and you attract the big resources to make things happen. Always. That's literally has been the way that I've worked all my life. And when I think about Dr. King and what's been going on in the world, you know, since he passed on to the next one, you know, I wonder what it would be like for him to look back or look at us right now. And I know he'd be encouraged by so many things, but I also think he'd be really disappointed by a lot of them. In particular, the fact that economic diversity in this country has been on the decline in a pretty major way. And so I want to tell you this story in light of that, and how what my work has been, and when I look out at this beautiful sea of faces, you know, all of you interested in social entrepreneurship in some way, shape, or form, and I think about the value that we can provide to this world in a real serious way, not just doctrine, not just ideology, but real, honest to goodness ways to change people's lives for the better. That's what inspires me. And so with that, I want to just tell you the story, because, you know, and I do this a lot. I tell the story of how I got to where I am and where I'm going through the lens of my family, my community, and where we've been, partially because I get to go down memory lane, and so humor me, why don't you? And but the other piece is that I think it does tell us really a story that is an American story in many different ways. And I'm just happy that you're here to be here with me. So my story started with these two guys, my beautiful parents, Major Wade and Tiny Carter. They were part of that great migration of blacks, you know, from down south, who came up looking for a great American dream. They ended up settling in the South Bronx, a little neighborhood called Hunts Point, and it was a walk-to-work community at the time. Literally, people would walk from the residential area into the manufacturing area. Our neighborhood had so much steel in it, it was called Little Pittsburgh. Other folks, black folks from down south, and then later on, black and brown folks from the Caribbean followed suit, and also settling in the South Bronx, just looking for their great American dream, just like everybody else. White flight happened. The highway construction boom happened as well. Highways were being built in ways that literally bisected and sometimes just completely destroyed whole thriving communities. Redlining, not the first time we've been in a financial crisis in this country at all. Redlining was the term that was deemed upon what bank presidents and their teams would do, where they draw red lines around areas where they were not going to make any kind of financial investment. And what does that mean when that happens? It means that you've got a business that needs, you know, some upgrade of equipment. You're not going to be able to get financing because no one's going to give you that kind of cash. You know, what happens when that happens? Think about that, and what does that mean for the economics in those communities? Oh, and I like to think this is one of my very first and earliest networking opportunities. I was talking to Santa Claus, you know, letting him know in certain terms that the Easter Bunny said I'd been a really good girl, so he should hook me up, you know, around Christmas time. But I was also at this time kind of just starting to plan my escape This is what I grew up with. The financial disinvestment of that times created the arson, the Bronx is burning. That's what it was. We were the poster child for urban blight for the longest time because of images like this, which I saw and lived through. Landlords were torching their own buildings in order to collect insurance money because that was more profitable than waiting for financial services to come into the community. But this is what we lived with. And we got a chance to see, so much of our neighborhood played out on the nightly news as the place where literally nothing good could ever come from. Even though, yes, we were a community. It actually was a thriving community, people who depended on each other. But what the perception was that there was absolutely nothing of value here. And we felt that as the people who lived there. But these were our little playgrounds, because that's what we had. And we knew that there was still a lot wrong in our own community. And I, personally experienced with the death of my brother, who was killed in a drug war a couple neighborhoods over from ours, even though he just served 2 separate tours in Vietnam and came home to us and went out a few years later. But all of that to say that all that financial disinvestment, these manufacturing firms that were embedded in our community for so long, all gone. This kind of stuff came and took the place of it, which created a lot of the problems that we experience even to this day. We still have a very high childhood asthma hospitalization rate. Diabetes and obesity absolutely directly related to how a community is planned. If parents are feeling like their kids are going to get hit by a truck, or that they're already compromised, respiratory system is going to be impacted in a serious way, they're not going to let them go out and get the physical activity they would do. Because honestly, the pictures of kids playing in the little the wastelands that were out there, we were out there. That's because those were our playgrounds. That's not so much the case anymore. Probably one of the worst things that we discovered was back in 2006, Columbia University did this amazing bit of research that concluded that proximity to fossil fuel emissions can cause learning disabilities in young children. And where do you find those fossil fuel emitting sources in great supply? You find them either in or near poor communities. And we know statistically that in this country, poor kids who do poorly in school, statistically, go to jail. So it was like we were creating this pipeline directly from poverty into prison. So, like I said, when I was like 5 to 7 years old and things started burning around me, I was like, I am so getting out of here. I'm a smart kid and I knew it. And this is the thing, I wasn't that unusual, because the whole kind of, we measured success in communities like mine by how far you were able to get away from it. So at the age of 7, when my brother was killed at the end of the summer, and at the beginning of the summer, I watched the 2 buildings on either end of my block burn down. I was like, I'm out of here. And I started planning to go to the Bronx High School of Science. I got myself in. I got myself into Wesleyan University. And I was never, ever going to go back to that place that I lived for the bulk of my life, except to go home to eat my mother's fried chicken. But that was about it. That was my plan, seriously. And I got myself into NYU, and I became very clear I could not afford to live downtown, which is where, of course, all the cool people live. And so I had to move back in with my parents, which was horrifying to me. But it was an amazing thing, because I got a chance to move back home, and it was good to have a little bit of education, or a lot of education, and a lot more distance. And you realize that, things don't always happen the way they do in communities like this one. And it was really fascinating, because I moved in at the time when the city was planning to privatize waste handling in New York City. Literally hand it over to these little companies that really were created in direct response to the city saying we wanted to privatize it. I was like, oh yeah, you're going to come up with some real winners there. And of course they did. And guess where they wanted to locate all these huge waste facilities, concentrate them even more in poor communities like mine. And so I moved back into the neighborhood at that time, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is only happening here because we happen to be a poor community of color, and thus it's politically expedient to do that stuff here. And I could have pretended that I didn't see it, and honey, nobody would have blamed me. Nobody. I was one of the smart ones. I was one of the bright flighters, who got myself out of there. No one would have blamed me. But I saw it, and I could not look, and I didn't want to not do something about it. So again, identifying a need and a desirable way to provide a way to fill that need for people. And it became my life's work in a really crazy way. And so developing, working to create a more sustainable solid waste management plan, absolutely, and I was in it for the long haul. But really what made me decide that I wanted to do this type of work was that, I looked at my community as this huge, big thing that had a lot of unmet needs. People wanted to live excellent lives, but in so many ways they didn't have the opportunity to do so. And so I thought, well, if the city and our state thinks of us as nothing except places to put garbage on, how about we transform that in a particular way? And I got my great gift in the form of a little bit of an angel investor who told us about this little seed grant from the U.S. Forest Service that was designed to provide opportunities to do restoration projects on the Bronx River. Now, I didn't even know we had a Bronx River. I just saw it on a subway map. And I knew there was a parkway named it, but that was literally the extent of my involvement with the natural world in my own community. Fortunately for me, they kept bugging me because they realized that, if she did some work with some other places, she might be helpful here. And we were able to get this tiny little seed grant. Once my dog literally pulled me into what I thought was another dump on the Bronx River. Turned out that it dead-ended at the Bronx River. That little $10,000 from the angel investor called the U.S. Forest Service was able to help us really kind of gauge interest in developing something on our waterfront. And we were able to build all sorts of interesting people who would help support it, whether they were local community folks, businesses, from inside and outside the neighborhood. We were able to, this was the beta test. This simple little version, we literally took all the trash out, put some wood chips down, made a path, and that was it. But we had to look and refine and see what else we wanted to see. And then we were able to attract some significant investors who helped out a lot, I must say. And a few years later, we were able to transform that dump into this, $3 million later. And it's the kind of thing, especially when you come from a community like this, when people start to see something this beautiful, after a while they stop asking, is it meant for me? Because they understand that it is. So developing that kind of capacity there was really important. And yes, I loved it so much that I got married there back in 2006 with Zena, my fabulous dog, the one who dragged me into it as my flower girl. But it became this rallying cry for and we were able to win a national award for excellence in urban planning, and this is Zena with her award. She really deserved it because she launched my career, basically. Unfortunately, we had to put her down last year, so yes, that's my girl. It's okay, we have her in a little box in her ashes, and then we literally keep her in the same place that she liked to sit in, so we say hello to her all the time. It's very sweet. So she doesn't answer back, though, so it's okay. But another project was, we started thinking about, what are some other needs we have in our community? Healthy recreation, stormwater management. We're a waterfront community. Dealing with climate adaptation is something we're going to have to start dealing with in a big way. We knew that things like greenways could provide opportunities for economic development, when they're done strategically and in important ways. And we were really excited about that. I learned about them. I was able to get a little bit of a secret, okay, it was a little more than a little, but $1.5 million from the Federal Highway Administration to do a project that literally was designed to reduce congestion and improve air quality. And I was like, a greenway, dedicated bike and pedestrian path, duh, that makes perfect sense. And so we were able to beta test a little bit of it, with just some planted medians, just really simple ones that were mostly concrete. But then later on, we were able to get about $50 million worth of first phase investments for this is just a little portion, of what we're looking at. But it's going to be an 11-mile network of greenways that goes all the way around the South Bronx waterfront, and also through the streets as traffic calming devices, and just ways to provide a much more lovely opportunity for people to get to where they're going. So it really does create new opportunities there as well. I think the thing I'm actually most proud of here is understanding the kind of needs around what was going on in our communities, which in particular kept people, I think, from realizing their full potential. Accessible job creation. We have a community, as we have in many places around this country, where we have a whole bunch of undereducated people, but we need to create new opportunities for them to develop, and to do productive things for society. And so we started one of the country's very first green-collar job training and placement system because we really wanted people to have both a personal as well as a financial stake in improving their own environment. Because we realize that economically empowered people are some of the best advocates for themselves and their communities. And so creating opportunities for them to create their own economic prosperity in a legitimate way was a really powerful tool. So we helped train them in the skills of ecological restoration, specifically starting first with wetland restoration, and then later on urban forestry management, green roofing, learning how to clean up contaminated land or brownfield remediation, and doing it in a really powerful way that allowed them to see value in themselves as productive human beings. And we also provided them with the kind of soft skills that they needed in order to develop into really productive folks. And most of the people that we worked with actually were folks who were generationally impoverished and people who were cycling in and out of the criminal justice system. People with significant barriers to employment. And so we had to teach them things that many of you would take for granted. How do you take initiative, on a work site? How do you be a team player when you really, really need to be? How do you make sure you look busy all the time, especially when your boss is around? If you've not ever seen someone in your household with a legitimate job and know the little things like, you get because you need to get on time because your boss says so, stuff like that, you wouldn't know. But training people to do this, that's why, to this day, we actually enjoy one of the highest placement rates, for that kind of program, which is really exciting. But, the kind of beta version that we went through, we were lucky enough to get a congressional appropriation to start, and we didn't exactly know what we were doing, but it turns out to be very expensive, and we trained very few people. We were able to refine that model and got the cost down to such a great level, and still were able to produce this kind of success, which is really very exciting. And so the kind of work that I did there, with Sustainable South Bronx really was the kind of thing that helped launch a whole bunch of things. Obviously, Sustainable South Bronx, Bronx River Alliance, Green for All. These are great organizations, local and national, that actually help, that are standing on their own right now, which I'm really, really proud of. But the kind of work that I want to continue to do, because it's always been about how do you create new landscapes and literally change the physical landscape that you see in front of you, it is a process. We're still working on it's research and development in the truest sense of the word. So I'm starting a new nonprofit called Hometown Security Laboratories, and it literally is about how do you create opportunities to try out these models that we know are going to increase economic diversity in the sustainable and built environment. And so we're really excited about what we're going to be doing there as well. But the interesting thing that I've discovered, especially in the past 4 years as I've worked doing consulting and advising around the country, is that I've been really struck by how real estate development is done in poor communities especially. And it's been really troubling to realize that there's only two kinds that happen. Only two kinds. There's the kind that assumes that the neighborhood's going to get, quote unquote, better, i.e. gentrified, and thus the poor people who were there and who were there because there was no place else they could be will be eventually pushed out. And then there's the kind that assumes that that neighborhood is going to remain a poor neighborhood for all of its days. And you see it for the kind of economic developments that are brought in. Everything from, instead of seeing the kind of decent places to buy food, you'll find corner stores and bodegas and, little 7-Elevens or whatever they're called. And, or instead of real financial institutions, you find things like pawn shops or payday loan places or check cashing stores, or you'll never see a place that has like, all sorts of liquor stores, plenty of them all over the place, 99-cent stores, really the kind of things that most folks would be happy not to see in their neighborhood. You'll find them in spades, in neighborhoods like that. And last but definitely not least, extraordinary amounts of super highly subsidized affordable housing. And you see it just concentrated. And what do you get? You get the effect of concentrated poverty. Interesting how that happens, huh? And so the more I thought about it, I was like, how did this happen? I mean, it's been happening clearly for a really long time. And the first time I started to think about it, I kept thinking, well, how did it get to this point? Because it wasn't always like this. And then I started thinking about, well, maybe there are some unintended consequences of integration that Dr. King definitely was not anticipating or hoping for. Matter of fact, I know he wasn't hoping for it. Because when you think about what he was doing at the very end of his life, the last day of his life, he was in Memphis, Tennessee, fighting on behalf of black sanitation workers because they did the filthiest jobs, the most dangerous ones, for the least amount of money. So he was not just there fighting for their racial equality. He was there fighting for their environmental equality as well as their economic equality. And of course, he was also hanging, with Latino farm workers and white coal miners trying to start the poor people's movement. And, but when you think about what happened with integration, prior to that, black communities, they were all black, but they were economically diverse. So it was not uncommon to have a black doctor who lived pretty gosh darn close to a black janitor. Didn't say that they always got along great, but there was a sense amongst the people there that they were in it together because they had to be. And then integration happens, and guess what? The people who could afford to leave those communities did. And what did it leave? That the kind of sense of aspiration, of a little kid being able to look and see like a whole host of people out there, of different income levels, of different personalities, of different professions. If you don't see possibility, you will not even be able to think about it. That's what happens. And I know this way too well because I still live in my community, 2 blocks away from the house I was born and raised in, actually. And if people don't see me leaving my house, they'll literally say to me, "So Majora, where do you live now?" Because to them, I'm a successful person. And successful people, in their minds, don't live in my neighborhood. So what does that do to the psyche of people both inside and outside those neighborhoods? It creates this wedge between us that I think destroys the quality of the fabric of all of our lives. It makes us against them. It gives us opportunity to see other people as the other. And it doesn't provide a sense of aspiration or togetherness that we once had. So obviously, I'm not saying that segregation is good. But I am saying that it did allow many of the hopeful ones in our community, it gave them great opportunities to just leave the ones who actually needed to feel hopeful behind. And it is all about economic diversity and increasing opportunities for it in ways that allows the fabric of our communities to actually be something more than they are. Because we don't need to be concentrating poverty any more than we do. We know that all it does is create more poverty. Dr. King would absolutely agree with that. I mean, the stats in this country would agree with me there as well. So And so I started thinking about, well, is there a way, can you use real estate as a transformative tool, as a strategic tool to make this happen? Not just say, let's just make a nice building for the poor people to live in, and then all will be well. But no, let's really think about ways to create new opportunities for poor people to become less poor, to make it so that people who actually have the ability to leave those communities to want to stay in them. Let's make it so that people don't have to move out of their neighborhoods in order to live in a better one. How about we think about real estate development that way? And so I kind of got my dream, literally, walking to my office one day and past this building that I'd seen every single day for my life, which was a former juvenile detention facility called Spofford that the city had just closed down the year before, and it was not to be reopened again as a juvenile detention facility. Sat on 5 acres of land. My father was actually a janitor in this place. And I remember the kind of stories, when I was a kid, that he would bring home to my mom about how he wished that our house was bigger so that he could take in more kids. And believe me, we did take in a bunch of kids and took care of them. We had a house like that, which was sometimes nice. Yeah, sometimes. I'm the youngest of 10, and there were just so many people around. And I was a weird one who didn't play sports or was really shy, so I just didn't fit in. But anyway. But I do remember my dad talking about it, and it was the place that you were threatened with as a kid. If you were bad, that's where you were going to go. I mean, rappers talk about it. Mike Tyson spent time there. It's a place that broke people, and everyone knew it. For years, prison rights advocates as well as children's aid advocates had been trying to shut this place down, and they finally got their wish. And then I was looking at this place and just looking at it, completely closed, and it had been there for a while that way. And I was like, you know what? That could be a really cool place to sort of prove out this model of how do you do economic diversity in a way that's meaningful, where you can create mixed income housing and mixed use commercial development that could provide a real opportunity for the community to grow. And the more I looked at this area and really just analyzed it, I realized, you know what? There's what I see in this neighborhood is actually quite common to a lot of post-industrial American cities. You've got the little orange part, which is where people live, the residential section, and the blue area is where the industry is or was. And that there's always like a little overlapping hinge area right in the middle. But if you look around, and that's where the Spofford Juvenile Detention Center was. But if you look around, as you look at any place, and they might not be obvious in all places, but every community has assets. Every community has assets. They might not be totally apparent, but you have to look at it. I didn't know that we had the only true freshwater river in all of New York City, 6 blocks from my house. I did not know that until somebody from outside the neighborhood told me. And so I know that there are hidden jewels out there in everybody's neighborhood. For us, we knew we had a waterfront. We had a greenway coming. We have access to public transportation. It's the envy. Seriously good. And so I was like, wait a second. If we can build on these assets, what can we do in that little hinge area? And so thinking about that site as a catalyst, first, let's deal with the housing. You have to have the type of housing. Yes, you want affordable housing because some people will need it. But I don't want to live with the assumption that poor people are always going to stay poor. I want to think about options that are going to allow them that it's more transitional housing, and that people, as they lift up their economic profile, they can move elsewhere, which is awesome. But there's also got to be housing that's good enough for the people who actually could afford to move someplace else if they chose to. So mixed income housing, quality, beautiful, fabulous housing. Manufacturing and education. This is a really important piece because you want great places for people to learn to do the new economic developments of the future. We did a lot of analysis and realized that the trends that are happening right now are in different types of manufacturing, in particular apparel, boutique apparel, even technology, also in food. I'm not really interested in the growing food in urban areas that much, because I think the real value for real economic development is in the manufacturing of it. Two completely different things, but really exciting. Public space, I think, is also a really tremendous opportunity as well for there to be the great democratized. You can do all sorts of things in a public area. The public realm has to be the place where people can feel like they don't need money to to experience the pleasure of it, but obviously we know that access to nature and doing it really well just humanizes a place. So that's a really important thing. And the commercial and retail, on some level, yes, it's a job creator, but it also provides all those beautiful things that make people want to stay in a community. Right now, almost none of my money stays in my own community. Why? Because there's really nothing there I want to buy, which means I have to leave my neighborhood and spend money in somebody else's. I want to spend money in my neighborhood. I would like a decent coffee shop. I would like to buy some clothing or something, there. But creating these kind of opportunities for retail, and just so that you get the opportunity for the ground plane to be activated in ways where people are shopping and spending money and enjoying each other, and you're watching the dollars circulate throughout that local economy. That is a really important thing. And yes, they also provide jobs as well. But it really is about the building of the community as well. And so in terms of the kind of phasing in this particular development, technology, a huge piece that we're looking at right now. In New York City, we've got Silicon Alley as opposed to Silicon Valley, but it's amazing what's going on there. But the access that we're experiencing in terms of communities like mine participating in the technology revolution, it's almost non-existent. We are definitely consumers of technology, huge consumers of technology. Twitter, frankly, would barely exist without black women. 40% of the folks that use Twitter are people who look like me. Okay, but how many of y'all knew that? Okay, there's so many stats about technology and people of color and poor people in general. It's astonishing, but we only do it as consumers. I want to be able to help people understand that they could be producers of this stuff too. And so we started along this line back in 2007 when I brought MIT, their Fab Lab, which is short for Fabrication Laboratory, to the neighborhood. And literally, it's just Fabrication Lab is when you link personal computers with fabrication machines, and rapid prototyping is the name of the process that it goes through. So you're literally, once you know the software, you can literally create anything from well, not everything, but it's kind of Star Trek-y, but you can do a whole lot of stuff. It's really exciting. So things like furniture and clothing. And there's this surgeon, I swear, it's so crazy, but he's actually using rapid prototype to create organs for human transplant. Oh my God. So you can't do that stuff in a place like this, but you get the general idea. But we were able to bring this to our community specifically because we wanted people to feel like they were creators and inventors in their own right. Like this was the beta test for the technology venture that we're working on right now. And it really was amazing to kind of watch this happen because we knew that the truth was out there for people to sort of see themselves creatively in that way. So these little those pallet boxes up there, stuff comes into our neighborhood and then they get broken apart and thrown away. Some folks who went through this program realized that if you pull the pallet boxes apart and then lashed them together and created a program so that you could turn it into stuff like this. So this was a really cool little side hustle for many of the folks that went through this program. It was a little furniture making business that was just so inspiring. And now we're starting a new program called Startup Box South Bronx. And it is a technology, education, and entrepreneurship program that's designed to help people minimize their disconnect from seeing themselves as full participants in the revolution that is technology and entrepreneurship. And so we did a soft launch at a local high school called Fannie Lou Hamer, and where these kids, within just a week or so, they were coding and creating games and doing these like super crazy things, and I don't even fully understand how to explain it, but it was just really inspiring to see like a 14 and a 15-year-old kid like develop these programs and see the power of what they created on their own. And it was just, it gives me goosebumps to think about it. And we're getting a little storefront space right on the main avenue in the neighborhood where we're going to do these light touch versions of having folks do speaking seminars and series just to remind folks about the value and the beauty of what technology and entrepreneurship can be. And just get it out there in a really, I think, very light touch but fun way to make sure that happens. But again, the idea of real estate development as a tool to transform a community, and not just in like these little goofy ways, but I mean, really seriously, like this is one of the sides of the juvenile detention center. When all the planning that was going on in this area, this place, it was always kind of like nothing ever happened there. And you see it in the types of developments that go on there. There's nothing there except the truck parking lot, and maybe there's like an engine rebuilding place. But really what this particular street and the neighborhood's more known as is the place where truckers go to pick up a prostitute at night, because it is lonely and desolate and nothing ever happens there. But what would happen when you change, literally, what goes on that street? Guess what? Everything changes. You suddenly have opportunities for economic development. You suddenly have opportunities for people to have real, meaningful connections. You're building community in a way that's really powerful for people to see. And the idea is not that just this little 5-acre thing is going to be just this diamond in the rough, because that's what I hate, frankly, about most approaches to community development. It is so piecemeal, and like, we're going to build a green building here, or we're going to create a great program here. It's like, I'm so sick of that crap, I can't even tell you. Let's get stuff to scale, literally transform stuff. I want to use this as a model and use it to show what is the bar, what is the high standard that we need to go to in order to change, create some systemic change in our community where we are absolutely addressing economic diversity and expecting it to grow. So you can't do that unless you maintain that for the type of quality that you're putting into your projects to start. So when I think about what this community is going to look like, as we continue to move forward on it, and so wish us luck. We're going to be applying, to win the request for proposal for this particular site pretty soon. And hopefully, as we go forward, it's going to be that kind of transformative piece that just moves well beyond where we are right now. But in the meantime, we're thinking about how do we use the momentum that we've been building about what a real community needs, and thinking about what we have in it right now. And so this little building is actually right on the gateway to our neighborhood. It's a minute away from the subway. It is the only major pedestrian thoroughfare to get you into the neighborhood. This building, for any of you architectural buffs out there, was designed by Cass Gilbert, the architect that did the Woolworth building. But and this was one of the things he did before he got really famous. But you can't really tell what it is. But it's actually quite a beautiful building. But unfortunately, it had been used mostly for the past 40 years or so. It was subdivided into some kind of pizza shops and beauty salons and stuff like that. Amtrak, the owner of it, decided that they no longer wanted to be a landlord and evicted everybody. And again, this is the first thing that people see when they walk into the neighborhood. So there it was, shuttered, and it literally was bringing back to people the image of what the South Bronx used to be, like this shuttered, awful place that people didn't want to be anywhere near. And I just called them up out of the blue and said, hey, I'm really interested in obtaining the long-term lease for that site. And the universe was smiling, I guess, because they were like, we will consider that. And so I'm in negotiations with them right now to obtain the lease on this particular site. But in the meantime, that's going to take a while, and it still looks like hell. So we hired a few kids from the neighborhood, about 10 of them or so, to design a beautiful mosaic public art project to go along the length of it, and really inspire them to think about their role as new artists in their community, but not just artists in the traditional sense of art, but really artists in terms of what kind of creativity and experience that were they providing for people who saw this. And these young people were, first of all, this was in many of their cases the first job they ever had. So for them, this was like a very serious summer, but it also provided them the opportunity to think about themselves, in ways, because they were like little heroes in the neighborhood, because they got to design and implement a project that was, by nature, the only reason it was there was to bring light and happiness to people who saw it, and that was their job. And they took it really, really, really seriously in a very, very powerful way. And I'm just so pleased, with what they did and how they were able to take this into serious consideration. And I just see these little heroes running around my neighborhood all the time, and I'm just so proud of them with what they've taken and then turned it into something like this. because that is the beginning of what we hope is going to look like this, more of the type of economic development that really is going to attract the kind of support and positive associations with the community than something that it ever did before. And so, as I think about changing the physical landscape to increase economic diversity, and how, Dr. King, in his lifetime, what he went through, and all I could think is like, what, the work's not done. We have so much more to do, but I feel as though he's smiling on all of us right now, but expecting us to be just as impatient as he was, legitimately so. This quote is from the letter from a Birmingham jail, which, for those of you who don't know, he wrote it from the Birmingham jail, as a direct response to a group of white ministers, who wrote an open letter telling him to kind of stop doing the integration thing. And I'm sure worried for him and his life, but also just not quite grasping, the severity of the situation. So the whole letter is incredible, but this piece spoke volumes to me, because again, it wasn't about ideology. It was about how do you transform a community so people feel whole, so that they can afford to be generous, so that they can live out their true beauty and experience that and give it away in really powerful, meaningful ways, so that we all benefit from it. And so for Dr. King to be at the end of his life fighting for racial, environmental, and economic equality, if he could do that and pay the ultimate price for it, then the rest of it should be easy for us. Because I feel as though we've spent so much time sort of collecting tributes, putting them out there and feeling bad about them. All these things are all about our collective failures. But we have it within ourselves to build monuments to hope and possibility. That is your job. Thank you.
We're stunned. Can you all hear me? Good. We're stunned. Majora, thank you. Before we have questions, and thank you for taking the time to field some questions, I want to give a shout out to our colleague Jennifer Herrera, who is kind of the key person behind Martin Luther King Week here. And she is not here because she made the right choice. Her daughter Lexa has a dance recital tonight, which is a big deal for her. So, but you'll see her tomorrow morning, and she is a big reason we're all here together. So we have a mic, and my role is simply to see who would like to ask a question or two.
My name is Ian. I'm one of the Commons Deans here at Middlebury. A lot of the projects that you've been describing, the greenways, parks, and so forth, look really fantastic. Could you tell us a little bit about what sort of mechanisms you've been able to put in place for long-term maintenance of these? You know, it's one thing to get a project to get a median looking really nice down the boulevard, but it's another thing to keep it looking nice year after year. It's one thing to build soccer fields so people can play, but if they're not maintained, they quickly turn back to, dusty, open lots. So could you reflect a little bit on what you've been able to do for the long-term maintenance of a lot of these projects of yours?
Be a pain in the butt constantly. Interestingly enough, most of our projects at some time or another all ran the risk of the city basically saying, oh my gosh, we can't build it because we don't have money to maintain it. And I was like, these are not amenities. These are real strategic pieces of development, and the investment that you put in them is something that we need to make sure we get and support it. So part of what we did was actually raise enough of our own money to actually start doing some of the maintenance ourselves to show the city that this is something we could do. So we actually did put some skin in the game. But then after that, it was just, we really had to push the city to ensure that doing these type of things and making sure that they saw the value in it as a valuable part of the city for itself, from stormwater management. You could even go as far as to say crime prevention. I mean, all sorts of these things. Because I think you would know probably very well that unmaintained, pieces of land are it's probably, frankly, especially in a park context, it's better that they had never even been built than unmaintained. And so we kept pushing and we were really out there in terms of making sure that the city understood that. But part of it was just that we were so vocal about making sure that it happened. And I think that's why we're seeing a lot more better, like frankly, our stuff is maintained incredibly well. And the goal is to create better policies so that always happens. So it's not just the places who can afford to have the kind of public-private partnerships, with us, whether it's Museum Mile, or Central Park Conservancy or things like that, but that this is actually considered par for the course of a functioning city, as opposed to just like a really sweet thing. But honestly, much of it was just us being the most obnoxious squeaky wheel, really, because otherwise it wouldn't have happened.
Hi, thank you very much for coming. I thought the presentation was extremely inspiring. My question is just regarding, obviously within neighborhoods there are a diverse array of opinions regarding especially things like development.
Could you speak a little?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Is that better? Yeah.
Yes.
So my question is just regarding, within a community there's often a very diverse array of opinions regarding what should be done about the community. So I was just curious, kind of obviously we see your visions here, but I was curious whether, or if you could speak to an example where your vision kind of met with opposition within the community and how you kind of dealt with that.
Interesting early on, it wasn't that it met opposition, it's that the people had no idea what I was doing. They really didn't. It was like I was pushing the envelope. It just seemed to me that straight up advocacy wasn't working. I was like, things aren't changing. They're just not. I mean, people are still really poor. The neighborhood's still really polluted. There isn't any good food to buy. There are no parks to play in. I was like, why aren't we building something? And initially, when I made my first round saying, look, there's this dump on the river that I think we should turn into a park, people were like, we have real problems? Like, seriously, why are you going to do that? And the best gift in the world they ever gave me was not to not help me. They didn't help me. They absolutely did not. But what they did do, and this was the gift, they chose not to oppose me. They were just like, we're going to wait and see what you can do. And I was like, cool, thank you. And now they did it all. And I'm like, whatever. So it's really funny, but sometimes that is the case. And and now, in some regards, yeah, I do sometimes get some opposition, but the bottom line is, it's like, who am I looking for validation from? Other community-based organizations, or am I looking for validation from people, who are living in the community, who aren't necessarily a part of any community organization? And there is a difference between a community leader and a community person. There just is sometimes. Sometimes it's the same person, but not always. And I felt like we did our due diligence, in really going out to the community. Like for our real estate development projects, we do surveys, literally. We interviewed all the heads of community organizations in the neighborhood. We also literally went out on the street and started talking to people. of many different age groups. We'd go to senior citizen centers, and again, not always actively involved with anything or anybody, just folks. And when we kept hearing the same type of things coming from what their needs, aspirations, and problems were, we were like, okay, we think we got it. Are we going to please absolutely everybody? No, you're never going to please everybody. And you shouldn't try. Or what you can do is take into consideration seriously what people say, and that's what you do.
Peter, that was really amazing. Thank you very much. So obviously one of the nasty things.
So the mic. There's something up with the mic.
Sorry.
I think you really have to hold it to your mouth.
Yeah. So obviously one of the nasty things about urban poverty is that things can get really bad and it's very dense and everyone's there together and it can get you to a really deep hole. But when you start to turn things around, everybody can sort of start to move together. And I was wondering if you had any ideas about addressing rural poverty, or if there are other people involved in these sorts of things, but in places that aren't urban and dense, and how maybe this sort of model can be applied to places where people are really spread out.
Yeah, it was interesting when I started doing as much traveling as I did, and going into rural areas as well. How astonishingly similar, some of the problems of rural poverty looked like as compared to urban poverty. And obviously it was a really beautiful area in a lot of ways, a lot of green stuff, but everything from people feeling really hopeless, and obviously the unemployment, the health issues, often drug addiction in different ways. And it kind of struck me that even though I think the specifics of how you would do a development would obviously change based on the actual environment there, it still seemed to me that the real approach could be the same, which was look for the assets in that community, understand what the needs are, really define them, and try to figure out what would be ways to bring economic diversity to that place once you identify what the trends are. And it just seems to me that's the homework, that's and it's hard. None of this stuff is easy, not a bit of it, but it's a really important lesson, I think, to learn. What are the assets? What are the needs? How can you work to develop the assets and then support some of the needs, through economic developments?
Hi, thank you so much for sharing your work. I was just wondering a little bit about the educational piece, and how the local schools, for instance in the South Bronx, could be involved in these community projects.
Yeah. Was it the question, how are they or how will they? Okay. It's interesting working in New York City for now, because so much of the school system is very much based, obviously, on test scores. That's a national thing, I suppose. And we've not been able to penetrate the public school system. What we've done is actually develop good relationships with various schools, and that has been incredibly helpful, and that's how we really work to get into them, because we're not accredited in any particular way, so it literally is about the relationships and the schools seeing value in the work that we do. And we've got some great schools that we're working with, which is fantastic. I do wish that it was more of a systemic approach, that actually we would be able to get into the New York City public school system and show that this is of value. But I think as we work on the tech piece, we might be able to do that because we've got some relations in the city where it might work out that way. But it's going to be a hard road. Unfortunately, it's going to be hard.
Majora, I have a question just in the context of leadership. Right now, in the middle of winter term, we have this class called Midcore here, which is in many ways about leadership. And I think all of us tonight can get a sense of your intellect, your charisma, your vision. But what I want to ask you about is that let's say there's sort of a morning and you're rolling up your sleeves with people you know well, maybe not so well. You've got a few hours to move them forward. Tell us a little bit how that process works, how to lead, right? How to empower them, how to connect those dots in terms of getting a small group of people to want to take action by the end of a meeting like that?
There's two things. One, you got to take care of yourself. I think one of the saddest things that I've experienced, from when I guess I was deemed an activist before I was a social entrepreneur, was just seeing how often badly we take care of ourselves. And, I was personally hospitalized twice, working myself into it, and have lost mentors because they didn't take care of themselves. And so I think that kind of self-care and self-love is something that you have to exhibit towards yourself. And then it's easier, I think, to share that with other people. But in that regard, the question is, it is about the work. It's also about the people that you work with. And you don't always have to agree with everyone, but you do have to be smart enough to figure out try to figure out what's the self-interest of all the people that you're working with, whether you go out to dinner with them or whether you really don't like them. It does not make any difference. I have to work with lots of people, and I don't go out to dinner with all of them. But I do. There is the type of respect that sometimes is repaid and often is not. But it is about trying to understand that there are different ways of working with people, but always, 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 always. I feel if you're a person of integrity and you're being very forthright and honest about your agenda and trying to help people, make sure that we're all in it together, and that their compromise is an art, and the perfect is the enemy of the good. And if your goal is to really get something done, it will get done. And if it's not, then you need to find somebody else to work with.
Thank you very much.
Who's talking?
I'm a little nervous talking to a crowd. So I'm interested about your kind of, maybe you can make some theoretical reflections. You're talking about economic diversity. So, and I'm struggling a little with that idea, as you're talking about economic diversity and economic equality, and I think one doesn't create the other. So I'm interested in hearing maybe your opinion about that and economic development versus the redistribution of wealth, which is what would really elevate the community. So.
Right. I don't think I'm gonna. Well, let's just put it this way. I think that I want to bite off a piece of something that I know I can chew. I mean, as much as I would, I'm not even sure if I want to completely dismantle capitalism, but I don't think I can do that. What I know I can do is do what a lot of folks that I see who work within the field of community development don't even entertain. I'm really interested in harnessing the power of gentrification. Because quite frankly, I think that there's some good things about gentrification. There, I said it. Okay? There. Tweak that. Okay? Because the bottom line is, who doesn't like a nice, safe neighborhood? Who doesn't like being able to walk outside their door and get what they need? Who doesn't like knowing that when you go outside, there's going to be a cool place for you to go? Who doesn't like that? Poor people like that too. But you know what? We want that. We have to leave our neighborhoods. Okay? And you know what? I'm tired of that. I am sick and tired of that. So, the only way you can do some real change around that, because I also, look, my parents brought me up. Well, they started to go back to church when I was a little older, but they consider themselves like real God-fearing people. And so I do remember scriptures like, there'll always be the poor amongst you. The meek shall inherit the earth and all that kind of stuff. And that may be true, but I don't remember ever reading in that Bible that it's got to be the same daggone poor people. Didn't say anything about them moving up and out of poverty. And I'm sorry, the concentration of poverty is a terrible, terrible, terrible thing. If anybody thinks there's anything romantic about poverty, they have never been poor. Ever. or they glorify it in some like really crazy way that I think they should talk to someone about. So with that, I'm really interested in creating a platform that's going to allow people to move up and out of poverty. Not that there's this expectation that, so in that way, wealth is being created through various types of industries and enterprises that bring people along with it. I mean, that's why we're doing things like technology education and entrepreneurship, so that we can get people ready to participate in that stuff. The people who are left out of that right now, because we know where the world's going. And I'm sick and tired of watching economic booms just completely bypass our communities. And we only become the repositories for all the things that wealthier communities can afford to avoid. That's what happens. Because we're not economically feeling as though we're stable. And people who are economically unstable are never good advocates for themselves in real ways. Not for long. Because there's always something else for them to worry about. Always. And there's always a sense that you're less than. Always. And even if you do move up a bit, the common perception in this country is that when you move up a little bit, that you are thus better than where you left. And that's not a healthy thing for the people that are left there. So what we have to do is decriminalize poverty and create new opportunities for people to move up and out of it in meaningful ways that allow them the dignity and the accessibility to a better quality of life. That includes other people of different incomes, so that they know that they're not seeing that there's like this horrible disconnect between them. So I feel, obviously I feel a little strongly about that, because I see it all the time. I see people who feel as though they're never going to move. Like not just out of the neighborhood, but like in their minds. And that is just, why would we want that as a country? Why would we want that in neighborhoods not too far from here? Because you got it. I mean, this is Vermont. Not too many black folks, but there are a lot of poor ones here.
Thank you so much. This has been really inspiring. And I'm just wondering, you mentioned food manufacturing, and you mentioned food manufacturing,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm wondering if you could expand on that a little bit and explain what you mean.
Oh, sure. Basically, it's taking raw food and manufacturing it into a prepared one. Like, for example, creating school lunches. Huge opportunity for food manufacturing. People are wanting a lot more prepared foods right now. So having local places where you can create and do that, it's a form of manufacturing, a lot of it. And so that's just another way to do that. And especially if we're talking about where people are very interested in knowing the quality of their food and how it's being prepared, and that's an easy way to do it, frankly. And I think that there are opportunities in a lot of our cities where there's actually space to do that. So, and I think that's another growth trend that we need to pay special attention to and make sure that we're doing it wherever we can. Yeah.
Good evening. Thank you so much for coming and talking to us and being a role model for a lot of students here who are from the South Bronx.
Are you from the South Bronx?
Yeah.
Where are you from?
The Burnside and Sedgwick.
Get out!
Hello. My question for you is, you mentioned in your talk, if you don't see possibility, you will not be able to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to ask you, what is your opinion on not-for-profit helper organizations that are started by locals within the community versus organizations that are started by outsiders?
It really depends. I mean, partially look, I'm as local could get. I mean, I was Majora from the 600 block of Oneida Street. I mean, my family had been in that neighborhood for the time I started, almost 50 years. But I was so different from so many people in my neighborhood. To some people, frankly, some community organizations that were there before me, I was the outsider. Because, I had a college education. They did too, but, I talked like a white girl, and so they were just like, she doesn't really represent us. And so little things like that. But the interesting thing is that I'm more about the work as long as it's done in a respectful manner, I could give a crap. To be honest, I personally, I brought people into the community when I thought they would add value. And I make absolutely no apologies for it. None whatsoever. And people benefit from it because I knew enough about my community to know what it needed. Why? Because I listened. And it's about the work. It's about the projects that get done. I mean, this is why talk is so cheap, because you can talk up a blue streak, and I'm not the smartest, I'm not the best speaker, I'm not a bunch of things, but I have goals, and I know eventually how to get to them, and I build the kind of teams that help make them happen. And that's really the important thing. And you're not going to be able to do any of these things by yourself. I mean, that's just nonsense. It is utter and complete nonsense. And it's not a healthy way of approaching the world. It just isn't, because you're not in it by yourself. So I think that's a really... But yeah, I mean, if somebody comes in and acts really awfully and disrespectfully, yeah, they should be run out on a rail. I don't care if they were born and raised there. So that's that.
Hi. I think you already sort of addressed this, but I was kind of wondering if, in your map, you had different income housing, and I was wondering how, if you make the neighborhood more aesthetically beautiful, how you can kind of keep the people who are living in that neighborhood without it getting too overly gentrified.
Don't you think poor people like beautiful things?
No, I mean, I was just wondering if you make a neighborhood aesthetically beautiful and more people want to live in the neighborhood, would the prices go up and then kind of cause gentrification?
Well, I'm trying to exacerbate a little gentrification. I am. But the way that we're trying to do it is if you just make the place nicer and then price people out, yeah, of course that'll happen. But if you have a much more thoughtful, meaningful approach that actually includes opportunities for people to be gainfully employed so that they can move up the economic ladder themselves, then is it still gentrification when people are actually making more money themselves who are there? No, that's not quite gentrification. That's people moving into another economic stream, which is frankly, I think, a good thing. So I think that's the model of gentrification that I think that most people think about. That and maybe I should come up with a new word or something, because it's just people flip out with it. But essentially, I'm really interested in increasing economic diversity, even of a person. I feel that everybody that went through when I was running my green job training and placement system, most of them went from being on some kind of welfare to being gainfully employed. That was economic diversity. They moved up. I mean, many of them, and it wasn't huge amounts of money, but it was enough to keep them out of jail, which was incredible. The cost. I mean, every time I think of some of those guys and gals, I keep thinking that the city should have given us a cut for all the people, for saving the city so much money, by not locking them up in city or state jail. But that's another story. I was just happy that they were out. But the developing models so that people could move up an economic ladder, that, we shouldn't be afraid of that. We want to see more of that. And I do believe that one of the reasons why people in poor communities do such alienating things is because the community itself is alienating. And when that kind of feeling is oppressive, as I'm sure you would know, with your environment around you is just awful and ugly, that's why you leave them. But if it's beautiful, you want to take care of it. And when you feel as though your work is actually adding something and you're being productive in it, that reflects on you. So creating the kind of meaningful, dignified work, whatever it is, that's an important way to move people, not just economically, but I think emotionally and spiritually as well. Who's got the mic?
So I think the best talks leave you wanting a little more. So our forgiveness to those who have a few more hands up, but the time is nigh. Before we have one final moment together, Majora, thank you again on behalf of all of us. I also just want to acknowledge what a week it's been here. We began here Sunday night with the Do the Math tour, led by our own Bill McKibben, who's right here.
Woo! I heard about that. Oh, and just also, before you go on, I just want to, I heard today, and I got this awesome tour around campus with the lovely Hillary Platt, who's somewhere, I think, in the audience right here. So there you go. And thank you so much, because I just found out today, of the work that you guys are doing to divest yourself of fossil fuels, which is like incredibly powerful. And I'm just like, keep up the work, keep it going. Thank you, Bill, for being a part of it. So pretty awesome.